Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota, and today we will settle once and for all whether the Jimmy Johnson trade chart is obsolete.
Luke Inman at Luke_Spinman. We got March Madness this week. The Cinderella story, Arif Hassan can't win our company pool for 2 years in a row, Kenny.
No, I can't. I've got James Madison winning it all. Go Dukes, baby. I'm Arif Hassan from the Wide Left Substack.
And I'm Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings. I just want to shout out KJ Osborne for doing the Vikings one more solid on the way out.
Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party. It's your
Welcome in a brand new week on the Minnesota Football Party, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota. Thank you all who have already joined the live stream. We're going live now on this show Mondays and Thursdays on the Minnesota Football Party. Programming lineup at Locked On Sports Minnesota is extensive. The Ron Johnson Show on Tuesdays, Minnesota Basketball Party on Wednesdays, the Locked On Sports Minnesota Roundtable on Fridays, and of course, our guy, Luke Inman, doing the postcasts after every single game. This is the place to hang out when the clock hits zero. On today's Minnesota Football Party, we will circle back to Friday's trade. Vikings acquire number 23 is a trade up to the top 5 next. We'll get into our favorite free agency acquisitions for the Vikings. Whose loss are we mourning the most in free agency? Perhaps it's KJ Osborne, who Luke Braun alluded to. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. And one more reminder, not only can you watch us on Locked On Sports Minnesota, you can listen to us on the Locked On Vikings podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find that on the SiriusXM app. So much to get to today, and I promise too, if you have a question in the comments, we will attempt to get to it at the end of the show. And if you leave it in there right now, we can star it and favorite it and try to circle back to it later. So let us know your questions, and we'll attempt to address those. I'm going to go to our draft guy first, Luke Inman. The Vikings move up to number 23 on Friday, trading with Houston. They now have 11. They have 23. Now, when I look at the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, which many people tell me is obsolete, it tells me that the Vikings have enough to move to number 4, but not to number 3. When I look at the modern chart, the Fitzgerald-Spielberger chart, it tells me they have enough to get to number 1 with room to spare. So who do I believe? And does it even matter when you're dealing with this high of a pick? Because these other teams are going to go negotiate so hard with the Minnesota Vikings. Can they move into the top 5 with just these 2 picks?
Yeah, I think to get up to 4 or 5, it probably costs the 2 first and whatever, loose change you got between the couch cushions. So like a day 3 pick, just to sweeten the pot a little bit, pending, again, which chart you're looking at. But that feels right based off trades we've seen in the past. If you're talking about getting up to number 2 with Washington or number 3 with New England, with teams that absolutely cannot leave this draft without at least somebody new at quarterback, then I don't think it's enough, to be honest. I mean, they'll make Kwesi pay a premium, and it needs to be a king's ransom, which means probably next year's first on top, maybe even more, honestly. So now you're talking about 3 first-round picks in total, because we're talking about quarterbacks now. Unless I'm not sold on any of these guys at the top, if I'm Washington and maybe this is all smoke that I really love Jaden Daniels, or maybe New England really doesn't love Drake May as maybe, as much as has been reported, why would I not just stay put and just draft my guy? It's got to be an offer that they just can't refuse. And everyone's got their price, but I can almost guarantee that starts with next year's first on top of that, just to start. But, bigger picture, Kwesi's got more flexibility now. He's clearly got a plan. I think there's got to be at least a handshake deal probably in place, I would guess, with Arizona, because we know that Arizona GM, first-year GM last year, he likes to wheel and deal. He's willing to take an offer that, is going to net him more value and ammo if that means moving back. But that's probably plan B. Plan A is probably, let's see how the draft unfolds and see if we can't move up to 2 or 3, which again, I think is going to cost a lot more than maybe what some fans think is worth it on that trade chart.
Yeah, to me, my knee-jerk reaction is the Patriots are going to charge a premium because they've got no incentive to just give away number 3 when they could take themselves their quarterback of the future. And the Chargers worries me because if you get number 5, well, Arizona could screw you over. They could trade back and someone leapfrogs you. So Arizona feels like the target to me where you're not overpaying and you also have some security that you get one of the top 4. Arif Hassan, how does it strike you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a trade for a quarterback, right? I mean, we've got somebody in the chat already. Hoopstalk69, nice. Says, who cares? Give up these 2 first-round picks and get us a quarterback. And that's correct. Right?
Chad is very divided on this, by the way,
Yeah.
which rocks.
I love it. But like, obviously you have to be right about the quarterback. But if you're right about the quarterback, you've nailed it. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. And if you take a look at all of these nerds who put together all of these great little analytics trade charts or whatever, they all tell you, the people who put together the chart, to throw the charts out the window when a quarterback is involved. It's different. So, yeah, it is a loss by some of these charts, which, by the way, I don't think it's a loss by the Rich Hill trade chart, which I regard as the replacement for the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, because it's composed of a decade's worth of actual trades in the NFL draft to determine pick value. So it's not a theoretical chart like Jimmy Johnson. It's not one based off of historical outcomes like the Fitzgerald Spielberger chart or the approximate value chart that both Harvard and Chase Stewart have come up with. It's just based off of what the trades have been. And by that measure, that is a slight win for the Vikings. Now, it's a loss by most analytics charts because trade ups are usually losses and there's a lot of value in the middle and late rounds. But I think when it comes to a quarterback, things change, right? And so obviously this is a trade up for a quarterback. There are some questions in the chat about, hey, do we buy the steam that this is, a trade up with New England versus one with maybe Arizona? And I think Luke Braun last night kind of pointed out like, hey, if you take a look at all of these New England beat writers, man, if you take a look at everybody who covers the Patriots for a living, it's the Patriots. The Patriots are sending out a ton of feelers that the Vikings are the ones that are trading up. And not just that the Patriots are open to trading, which is like, maybe that's speculation, maybe that's not, but that it's the Vikings, which feels like it is some sort of sourced reporting, right? Even if they're not saying my sources say, right? They're like, hey, I think the Vikings are a good, I think they know. So, so I think that we're getting a pretty good sense of what's about to occur. I know that the Patriots might charge a little bit more than the Cardinals, but I don't think the Cardinals would charge that much substantially less because they also know that this would be a trade up for a quarterback, unless, of course, the Patriots take a quarterback and then remove a little bit of the market, right? Because now you're trading up for Jaden Daniels or JJ McCarthy or whatever the NFL thinks the 4th quarterback is, right? That does change things like a little bit, right? So, yeah. I love it. I think that a trade up for like a 1st-round pick just to get the picks working out for a quarterback, I think that's great.
Like quarterback is like the ultimate go get your guys position.
Right.
This is not the point where you like nickel and dime over
Right.
like, well, are we going to send one too many like 2025 3rd rounders? Like just go do whatever it takes. Right.
It's a home run swing or a strikeout either way.
Yeah, right.
Like, we're not going to be
like,
around in 2, 3 years, 4 years, whatever. Or
yeah. If you save a couple draft picks and then get a quarterback that doesn't work out, you're getting fired anyways. It's not going to save you that you saved a couple of draft picks.
And to that
so go
point,
get your guys.
Too, go get your guys. And to that point too, I am always, I was a big proponent of, hey, ease off on Spielman. I like these 7th-round picks. You can find a J-Ron Curse or some of the Anthony Harris guys like that. But I will say, you can say the same thing about some of these first. We got to give up 3 first, next year's first 2. That could be another Lewis Cine, a Mike Hughes. You just don't know is my point. So when it comes to quarterback,
which makes them less valuable than I think people talk about them around this time of year.
Right.
It's one guy. And it's one guy that might not work out. Like keep that in mind. But that's the same is true of a quarterback. So you're trading probabilistic assets for probabilistic assets.
Right.
But the way I see it, looking at everything that the New England beat has been talking about, it's pretty clear. And by the way, Darren Wolfson had this at like the Senior Bowl. So it's nobody's breaking anything here. That the Vikings have called and have been calling and have been talking to Elliott Wolf and the Patriots, and they're trying to tempt the Patriots. What we don't know, what the Patriots are holding very close to the chest, is if they're open to this at all, or if they're like, what? No, I'm taking Drake May. What? Or Jaden Daniels or whoever it is. If that's the case, then there's not really much you can do, right? If they just hang up on you, they hang up on you, and you got to move on to the next one. Maybe they're calling Arizona about that, but maybe Arizona's saying, yeah, but like we really love Marvin Harrison. I went on Locked On AZ Cards with Alex Clancy and talked about this, and apparently Arizona is like a lot of people in Arizona have had their eyes on Marvin Harrison for like 2 years, and he's talking a little bit more media and fans, but a little bit of the team too. So they might hang up on you too. And then it is the Chargers, and it is, probably JJ McCarthy there. And what's interesting to me in terms of like a compensation is, does it work the same, even though we're only 2 picks later than what the trade up to 3 would be, because it's JJ McCarthy instead of Drake May. And I think the perception on those 2 quarterbacks, the cliff there is bigger than 2 picks. I wonder if the price is different, because again, we're trading up for quarterbacks, not for like picks on the trade chart. But I don't know if that's actually how it would work, or if the Chargers would say, nah, we know that you need this guy because you're not very excited about Penix and Nix, so we're still going to bend you over a barrel. That's what's interesting to me. 2025 picks are on the table. Both the first rounders are on the table. Sorry, Denver and Vegas, you're not competing with Kwesi. He's going to pay what he needs to pay. He is not going to be like, what if I understand anything about Kwesi, it's that he's not going to cheap out right here. This is not the place where he's going to cheap out.
And again, he put himself in a great position now to have flexibility, though, right? Plan A, okay, maybe getting to number 3 with New England. Plan B, 4 or 5 for JJ McCarthy. Plan C, which, is Plan C for a reason, also intrigues me, taking someone like Jared Verse or Johnny Newton at 11, then maybe coming back with somebody like Penix at 23, if that's how the board falls. But the point is there's options there now, and I think it puts Kwesi in the driver's seat and kind of first in line when it comes to having conversation with these other GMs in that top 5 range over teams like Denver, Vegas, maybe even somebody like Seattle, although they just picked up Sam Howell now, so we'll see. But it puts him in the driver's seat and gives him the most flexibility.
I'd be stunned if they did not pick before the Giants. Like after making this trade, this is somebody in chat. IZ the Faithful said it. And if they didn't know that they were going to be like, if they were going, oh, I don't know if anyone lets us trade up, I think they at least know that the Chargers will let them trade up. Otherwise, they would not have done this trade with the Texans, which is very much swimming upstream.
No, I'm not dabbing. It's not happening. Sorry.
For the podcast listeners.
Yeah. Not happening.
Okay, but for real, do one. Just a quick one.
No, that's not happening.
Let me just get my GIF creator ready. Just hold on. Hold on. Now of the teams around the Vikings, because we live in this echo chamber on Vikings Twitter and all the reports that we get in our algorithm, makes it seem like the Vikings are the only team negotiating. Who are they bidding against here? Giants? You think yes? You think Giants are in?
I think you want to leave the Giants, but I don't think they're coming up.
Yeah, I don't think the Giants are coming up, man. I really, they have invested so much guaranteed money with Daniel Jones. They just got, okay, I know it's Drew Lock.
If they get leapfrogged and go, oh no, another Daniel Jones year, I guess we just have to see this out. Like they can maybe almost use that to save face a little bit and be like, well, we would have.
Yep, absolutely. And then you go draft a Malik Neighbors and finally give him some sort of weapon. Hopefully that O-line comes around. But yeah, I'm not too worried about the Giants taking a quarterback as much as everybody else. I understand it's an option. But I, for one, at the end of the day, think they end up going a different direction. I think it's got to be Denver, which, again, okay, what kind of position are they in? Not a ton of ammo. And then Vegas, I think Vegas, kind of like the Giants between, and again, I know the names. I get it, what it looks on paper, but between, who'd they just pick up? The old Jacksonville Jaguars. Thank you, Minshew. And then Aiden O'Connell had a lot of hype last year, even though he's a day 3 pick coming out of Purdue. Got some starting time, flashed a little bit, not a lot. But my point is, I think Denver is the one team I got circled right now that I would be worried about. And I'm really not that worried, especially now after this trade.
And they don't have
Does Denver have any ammo?
Right.
Yeah.
Does Denver have
second, which the Vikings have 2 firsts. They can't compete with the Vikings.
Yeah, New Orleans has their second.
Following the various beats around the NFL, the one that seems to be most conversant in the concept of trading up to number 3 is Denver, right? They're the ones that have been talking about it more than any other beat I've seen aside from the Vikings beat. So I think that they're the primary competition. That doesn't rule out, of course, a team like the Giants who have had, those discussions among their beat or another team. But Denver seems to be the one that's talking about it the most.
I want to continue with this discussion at some point later in the show, but I also want to get to some of the free agents that got overshadowed, I think, by all the Kirk Cousins news and quarterback talk last week. I want to get your guys' favorite acquisitions from week 1 of free agency. That's coming up next on the Minnesota Football Party. And we're brought to you today by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Rolling on the Minnesota Football Party, Luke Inman, Luke Braun, Arif Hassan. I'm Sam Ekstrom. Follow us all on X or follow at LockedOnMIN for show links from Locked On Sports Minnesota. Let's circle back to last week because I think that some of these signings, which are not nothing signings, got a little bit overshadowed. Who did you love that Kwesi picked up last week, whether it was depth or whether it was a starter? I mean, we got Aaron Jones, Blake Cashman, Andrew Van Ginkel. We talked quite a bit about Jonathan Grenard on this show because we broke that news live. Not that we broke it, but we saw it happen live.
We saw, we broke reporting live from Minnesota.
We reacted to the many real reports about that happening. But Luke Braun, let's start with you. What did you love about Kwesi's first week?
It's the boring answer, I think, but I think Grenard's my favorite, which sucks because it kind of gets overshadowed by the Danielle Hunter comparison, and I'm trying not to do that too much. I don't think the Vikings got the better player, but it wasn't a trade. I can look at those two things individually, and I really like what Grenard does. I like the versatility and the approach that he can have. I think the price was right. I think that he can put. He can do like any role that you ask him to do. He can set the edge in the run. He can, evade a pulling guard, that kind of thing. It seems like he's coming in to be like a focal point of the defense in the same way that Danielle Hunter was, which is a bigger thing than he had to do in Houston. So this is a bit of a step up for him role wise. And I'm excited to see what he can do with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's Grenard. I know it's a little bit boring, but they needed an edge rusher more than anything else. And not just like a body. We need a high-end, high-level guy, like in the absolute worst way, especially after Danielle walked. I mean, you could say that even before Danielle walked, but they couldn't even field a real front seven on, obvious passing downs with what they had on paper. So I think Grenard is number one just because of, the sheer need, the lack of bodies and talent they had without him. And just given how important the position is, pass rushers are just too valuable, man, not to have a competitive edge in that department. So he's number one. And then honestly, for me, I think once you get past him, I think the guy who's going to have the biggest impact and the guy who's going to maybe make the most splash plays, become one of the bigger, maybe fan favorites in year one, I think it's Van Ginkel. I just think he fits this scheme so perfectly. He's almost still kind of flying under the radar a little bit with just how good and dominant he was at times last year. I mean, from an efficiency standpoint, when you look at the numbers, dude was one of the best pass rushers in the league, at least for the money anyways, right? Like for what I paid, he's going to give you the best bang for the buck, I think, once we look back in year one.
Yeah, Van Ginkel is my guy too. Here's the stat I like most on Van Ginkel. He was number 2 last year in coverage plays, in pass coverage. He dropped 147 times. Doesn't that feel very Flores friendly, having an edge who's statistically a top 10 edge in some metrics from last year, who can also drop in coverage. That is so Flores. I love that. Imagine Van Ginkel lining up on the edge, like showing a 7-man front, and he drops and covers the tight end. And he was good at it. He had 4 passes broken up and a pick last year. That's definitely my favorite Van Ginkel stat. And you get him for $10 million a year for 2 years. That's like outstanding value. So I'm a huge Van Ginkel fan. And if Grenard kind of evened out Hunter, I think Van Ginkel, and this was a big Luke Inman point, he improves your defensive line. You're not just breaking even. He actually makes you better than you were last year.
Yeah, I can't get off of Van Ginkel. I think that's a great one. Like the Aaron Jones one is nice, $6 million for a running back that has showed, a fair amount of quality.
And it harms Packers fans, which is really important.
It harms Packers fans, which is
just
good.
as important, really.
It's great, yeah. The Grenard signing is like nice. I don't dislike it at all. It doesn't get my blood pumping in the same way that like, value and efficiency does. So I really like the Van Ginkel one. Yeah. But no, it's like the Grenard one is like, yeah, you met value for dollar. That's great. That's good. You should be doing that in free agency. That's a win. But the Van Ginkel one, I think, for like $10 million over 2 years, like if you take a look at the contracts in that range, it's about 4% of the cap, right? You take a look at guys that have signed that, and it is exactly the role that I envisioned for Van Ginkel, which is that he could start if the Vikings don't, grab an edge rusher in the draft or something along those lines. But if he doesn't start, if he's a rotational guy, you're not losing a ton in terms of like wasted cap space, and you'll find ways to put him on the field, right? You'll find ways to get him like 800 snaps in that scenario, right?
Yeah.
And he seems to thrive in that particular role. I mean, he was forced into a starting spot fairly regularly actually at Miami because of injury, and he did very well as a starter, but he seems to be like a plus rotation guy, right? Kind of like, Brian Robinson towards the end of his career with the Vikings, right? Like, and I think that getting that kind of production or value or efficiency from a guy really rules. I think we all agree though, the best free agent signing had to be Brandon Powell, right? $2 million.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wide receiver 3
for the buck.
Yeah, obviously,
Yeah.
right?
Competing with Trent Sherfield for it as it stands right now.
Yeah.
Let's go. Jalen Naylor in the mix. Our guy, Malik Knowles.
Malik
Don't forget about Malik
Knowles.
Yeah.
Still on that 90-man roster. Let's see if he cracks it this time.
Plug it along.
I will say,
Let's see if he makes it to camp.
Let's see if he makes it to camp, right? Yeah.
That was a savvy
50-50.
stash.
50-50.
Savvy stash.
I will say,
Right.
I see a lot of people in the stream in the comments shouting out Aaron Jones, and I think we all agree too. Jones, like Arif pointed out, I think after a few really bad seasons of just running the ball, it's going to be awfully nice. It's going to be a breath of fresh air to have a real running game again with Aaron Jones. If you get the guy we saw the last 5-6 weeks of the season
think
last year,
because
which I
of
think
that, I think because of that, we'll overstate Aaron Jones's influence.
Probably
like
will.
this season.
Yeah,
Like we'll be like,
right.
yeah,
We'll
man, what a great signing. And it's like, yeah, probably it's a good signing, but like I bet.
I think the running back of it all is like tempering everything.
Dude,
We
how
love it.
far
Everybody's
we've
too
come.
scared to be like, look at this running back signing now, because they'll get like yelled at by a bunch of nerds.
How far we've come in one offseason when we were
Yeah,
talking
it's
about running
like-
backs don't matter. Forget about
We just have to like
Dallas.
recalibrate what we
gotta
expect, like the impact we expect from a running back. Like,
Mhm.
do we just think of them as the same way we would think of like a rotational like base linebacker, or do we think of them as something more than that? Or, like, we just have to recalibrate the way we think about it, and then we can say, man, yeah, I love a special teamer. Like you can
Right.
still say that.
Right.
That's actually a pretty fair point. That like once we kind of adjust where we are, but that has to align with contract value, right? You take a look at the running back signings that have occurred in this free agency, a couple for $8 million a year for like DeAndre Swift, who's like, there's a reason he's like moving around all these teams, right? I much prefer Aaron Jones at 6 than DeAndre Swift at 8, right? Much prefer that. In that context, it's a great signing. I think it's mostly a good signing, right? Like I don't mind spending $6 million for this guy. I'm just always concerned about second contract running backs. It's just never going to leave my mind. Like the fact that Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey bucked that trend is great. That's fantastic for them, because before that, it was a decade of second contract running backs not doing anything. And so I'm always like, God, he's nearly retired. He's 26. I'm so concerned.
Hey,
He's
yeah.
arthritic.
Yeah. So there's that element of it too, where it's just like it's difficult for me to get that juiced about a free agent running back, not because running backs don't matter, but the underlying reason that running back picks are not that valuable is because they retire pretty quickly and they drop off pretty quickly. And Aaron Jones already has an injury history going into this. So it's tough for me to be like, yeah, I love it. But
Super
he's going to be
Bowl,
like
hang the
way,
banner.
way better.
Yeah.
Right. But he's going to be
Aaron
way better than
Jones
Alexander Madison. So
like people point to, sort the traditionalistic stats of tied a career low in yards per carry. He had a career best in success rate for what it's worth. And if I look deeper into his numbers, I don't see meaningful decline in like yards, after contact per attempt and yards over expected. He was better than AJ Dillon every year in those metrics. So I'm not sure that Aaron Jones is washed at this point. Now he could hit the cliff this year.
I mean,
he could.
When you watch
This would be a
him,
much more relevant conversation if it were like a 2 or 3 year deal too. Like it's one,
Yeah.
unless
Correct.
he hits the cliff exactly this year,
Right.
it's
Right.
fine.
Yeah.
Also, when you watch him for the Packers last year, I mean, first of all, they were struggling with AJ Dillon. They were drowning out
He's
there.
not good. He might just not
And-
be good. Yeah.
And Aaron
He got the
Jones
Oli
on the
contract.
field provided a pretty substantial change of pace in a good way, right? It was a pretty reasonable spark in the running game. Like Aaron Jones was significantly better than AJ Dillon. Watching what he did with the Packers, I would not argue that he's washed. My concern is that's what running backs do, right? They're not washed until suddenly they are. And you're right. It's a 1-year contract. It's not a big deal. It's just hard for me to get jazzed. Again, I think it's a good signing.
I get it.
It's just difficult for me to be overly excited.
I
right?
will say this
I'm more
too.
excited about this than the Jerry Tillery signing. I think,
Oh, there you
and
go.
I'm glad about the fan
Apples
base.
to apples, really.
Is he
Well,
starting?
no, I'm glad about the fan base not
Please
getting
say he's
super
not.
hyped about a former first-round pick. No, I don't think he's starting. Right?
Okay.
Like, there's a really good chance that Jonathan Bullard starts over him. Right?
Oh,
like, it's
Well, there's 3, right? If we're talking base defense, there's Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard, and then we got like
Jaquelin
Jerry
Roy?
Tillery versus Jaquelin Roy.
Right.
Well, and
And
let's
they'll
get
probably
into the
draft another day 3 guy. I just want to say real quick,
Yeah,
we'll
add
put a
another guy
bow
to
on
that for
Jones.
sure.
I know this stuff. Sometimes we roll our eyes. It's a little bit cliche. We don't even know really what it looks like because we're not on the field, in the locker room, on the practice field. But everything I've heard as well about Aaron Jones as the person and like off the field as a teammate, nothing but glowing colors too as well.
he was
So
pretty
that's
vibrant in
kind
the
of exciting
presser.
as well.
He was pretty great.
Yeah, he was
He was
vibrant.
having a
man.
good time.
That was an A+
Yeah.
presser for sure. Yeah.
I want your guys' favorite depth signing that we've had recently. So options
Brandon Powell.
being Tillery, Trent Sherfield, Dan Feeney, or of course the XFL's greatest kicker, John Parker Romo, a gaudy 9 of 10 from 40 and beyond last year for the San Antonio Brahmas, I think.
Question
Brahmas.
mark?
Yes, the
Yeah.
Browns.
Arif, you probably broke down his film and wrote articles about it on Wide Left. But who do you guys like?
Again, last year I sat on this show and I swore Jonathan Bullard was going to be nothing more than a camp body. Ended up eating my words on that one, obviously. So I'm not going to say I like Tillery as much as I like Bullard coming out, because I didn't, even though Bullard was a third, Tillery was a first. I just thought Bullard was better. But my point is, I guess you just don't know, especially in a Brian Flores front seven where, guys are constantly being schemed up and put in these one-on-one situations, and anyone can end up getting a cleanup sack or end up making a splash play on any given Sunday. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I will say they really needed bodies more than anything, more than any other position, even on that defensive line, big time in the
And they
worst
still
way.
do.
So, and they still do.
What do you
So
bring,
I
like
think-
8 or 9 into camp? They've got like 5
Dude,
right now.
They got nothing. So
Yeah.
I think, as of today, there's a real shot he can stick
gonna be
around just based off the
a
pure
ton of
numbers.
potential Tom Johnson signed in a
Tom
couple
Yeah,
of weeks.
Yeah.
a couple of
Who was
randos,
the,
couple of UDFAs.
Does the
Who was-
XFL have anyone else floating around?
Who was the guy who blew up
At
in the
defensive
preseason?
tackle?
The
Probably
defensive
not.
tackle.
Oh,
I
yeah,
think he
yeah.
went to the Colts.
With the
Or
initials,
was from the
T.Y.
Colts.
McGill. T.Y.
T.Y.
McGill.
Gill,
T.Y. McGill. season,
2022
maybe.
preseason god.
Yeah.
Speaking
Tried to get
of
cute.
overvalued defensive tackles because of small numbers of snaps, Kairos Tonga gone. Rips. Would have been nice to keep him.
Cardinals?
Yeah, Cardinals.
Cardinals. Rip.
That was definitely, nobody had that in going into the preseason of Bullard shouldering Kyrie's
No.
Tonga out of snaps.
No,
I
Tonga
love
had some
the
real.
idea of Tonga.
Tonga had some real steam. Feeney, let's just touch on Feeney real quick. Remember, he came out in that 2017 class, which was one where the Vikings had no first, right? For Sam Bradford. Philly took Derek Barnett, I want to say. 15, 16, something like that. They took Dalvin with their first pick in the second. If you guys remember, there was a lot of back and forth between should they take Joe Mixon or should they take Dalvin? Do you guys remember all that buzz?
The team they traded up with took Joe Mixon, right? Because they traded up with the Bengals.
Yep.
Bengals
and I remember too, the Bucks had like the 20th pick. Bucks fans really wanted Dalvin Cook too. I remember that. They ended up taking OJ Howard, who's still to this day, OJ Howard. And
generational tight end prospect, OJ Howard.
Dude, one of my biggest misses of all time. I thought that dude was going to be like legit Pro Bowl guy. He looked so good in Mobile at Senior Bowl week and all that.
Wait,
but anyways,
but here's the thing. So I fell into the trap too. So I'm making fun of myself just as much. He was looking good against in Mobile. It was like Ryan Anderson, who's an edge rusher. He's like destroying this guy in coverage, and we were like, my God.
I thought he looked good in blocking.
Senior Bowl whip routes. Never again.
Which is usually the hardest transition for tight ends to make. That's why it usually takes a couple years.
He's primarily a blocker. He's primarily a blocker in Alabama. It's just he would go off in a bowl game, and everyone's like,
that's
yards in a bowl game. That's not bad.
These Alabama tight ends, man, you got to be careful.
Sam, there's one depth guy that you didn't mention. He's my favorite. Sam Darnold, depth signing.
Actually, no, I do like that.
High-end backup.
I love the signing. But,
I like the signing. I'm sorry.
Rookie's going to start all year. That's a backup. That's a great backup quarterback.
I posted the clip of us talking Darnold on Thursday over the weekend, and the majority of commenters have a strong belief that Sam Darnold is not just a body, like that he can be something.
He's actually like he'll probably start
God.
at the beginning of the season, depending on how
will
the
too.
quarterback is.
Yeah.
Like if it's JJ McCarthy and he's young and he hasn't played a bunch, like, yeah, man, like give him a half a season to get acclimated. Sam Darnold limps you through. You're 3 and 5.
Yeah, right.
It's Jaden Daniels, and he's old and he's played a lot. He's still probably not starting.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Let me circle back.
I want to say it was Daniel Jeremiah that said that like it's more about like games played that predicts like whether or not you start right away rather than like actual age or even like other even like draft pedigree or whatever.
Does anybody remember who the Vikings ended up picking one pick before the Chargers took Dan Feeney? I'm sure one of you know this.
What year?
2017.
And what
Yeah,
round?
it's Pat Elflein, no?
Pat Elflein, Remington Award winner, baby.
Yeah.
It's just funny how they went bang bang like that in the third round, and here we are 7 years later. Funny that the Chargers, by the way, also ended up with both Lamb and Feeney. I was so jealous, man.
We all wanted Lamb so bad.
Yeah.
And honestly,
I thought the Chargers nailed that because Dan Feeney was good in college. Had this, I think, 2 concussions. He had a concussion issue in college that sunk him. And he's like not been good in the NFL, which is a shame. But man, I loved him as a pick so much.
In that draft,
I remember
from picks like 30 to 60, there was so many solid offensive line prospect. Deion Dawkins, I love from the Senior Bowl. Forrest Lamp, Ethan Posick from LSU. Is he a center? He's too tall to be a center. He's 6'6".
I did not like Posick, man.
He ended up being the best player out of the
Ramczyk. Right. Ryan Ramczyk, Cam Robinson, Feeney. There were so many. It was just
Ryan Ramczyk.
Looking back,
we're talking about the best players from that draft. There you go.
I was talking interior guys, but I guess then that does disqualify Posick.
Deion Dawkins.
They're all
because Posick ended up being good at right tackle, right?
Yeah. But Feeney feels like the new Chris Reed kind of, right? Like the backup guard behind Brandel kind of thing.
Poor man's Chris Reed.
Guy,
I love him as long as he never plays. Finished first, third, and first in his 3 like full seasons in pressures allowed,
which
both at center and left guard. Yeah, but he can play those positions all right. He can play them.
Yeah, he definitely has experience.
Poorly. It was a scheme, Sam. He's a scheme guy.
The scheme.
You got to scheme him over.
Yes.
Yeah,
he did take the field.
He had bad supporting cast.
He played in.
Bad supporting cast.
Yeah, there it is.
It's the ecosystem, all right, with these guards. All right?
That Chargers O-line, that's toxic. You got to get him out of there.
Exactly.
Did you guys know that Trent Sherfield was the butt punt guy?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned
little fun fact.
Very good.
About Sherfield.
I did not.
Yeah. Also, I kind of like him. I kind of like that pickup. Like, he's going to eat up a lot of special team snaps.
Is he good?
Him and Najee as gunners. Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's going to work out of the slot. He's sneaky tough on contesteds. I think
he is. Is he gritty?
The next Brandon Powell.
Okay.
The next Brandon, dude.
Wow.
Compete with
Okay,
Brandon Powell.
If you had to put a bet down, Brandon Powell, Jalen Naylor, Sherfield, without a doubt, Powell for that number 3. Excuse me, for that number 3.
Not without a doubt.
Powell, but I
Not without
think
a doubt.
Naylor.
Oh, without a doubt.
Naylor just had a weird year. Like Naylor was hurt
He got hurt.
and never really.
Yeah.
He got hurt
When he
again.
came back, they had him run only clear out routes.
Yeah.
I need some
And
clarification.
then they took him off the field. Yeah, it was
Everybody
rough.
talked about KJ Osborne, big shout out, got us that extra third. So what's the deal with
Yes.
Reisner? I know we can sign Reisner now and not lose that third, but if Reisner does sign elsewhere, do we get another comp pick, or is that
We would be in
Watch.
line for like a 7th. It wouldn't
Okay.
do a lot, but it would be, hey, ain't nothing.
okay? Oh, no, I was
Yeah.
just curious.
Plus, it gives you a little bit more cushion, so then you can sign like 2 people.
Right. Because then you
Vikings
could,
are
that's the real thing is you
Yeah.
could sign another compensatory free agent and then it would
Got
cancel
it.
Reisner out instead of your third.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good to know. That's good to know. So it's not nothing, but I think most fans, the way I just hear them talking about on the timeline, on the show, everything else, would rather have Reisner back versus a 6th or 7th round comp pick. That's just the feeling I get right now.
So Kwesi went on 9 to noon
Mhm.
just this morning and I was asked about Reisner and said, we look for the best available. Every option is on the table. That's all I can say about that. I don't think he's coming back, everybody.
That's crazy.
That's
He
we
wasn't
don't
bad.
thank you very much.
He wasn't bad.
He was
I
not
don't
bad
think he
at
was
all.
bad either, man.
Yeah, I think.
Hey, maybe that 6th rounder
we
you
had-
got for Ezra Cleveland will solve
Yeah,
your
there you
starting
go.
guard problem.
God, but yeah, he well, when we had this discussion about re-signing him, I think we all agreed he wasn't bad. But my issue is that he's like kind of clearly not a scheme fit given his athleticism, and so you would have to ask him to do things that are outside of what the Vikings would prefer to do in the run game.
Wow,
And
that's
then
crazy.
You
Did they
can't,
have anyone in the building who fit the scheme?
not after they signed him.
Right.
And it's so funny because Cleveland was like genuinely bad in Jacksonville, and they just like, yeah, this doesn't matter. We'll just re-up him.
Yeah.
And,
They were
and I
always
think they're
gonna, I
right.
guess.
Is it,
Yeah,
is it
you're
fair
right.
to just say that Kwesi has decided that paying guards big money is not
Dude.
is not worth his time?
That
as
is
a GM?
low-key
Like
the
philosophically.
eight
I
of
We'll
doubt
see
it.
what
We
happens
need
with
to
Ed
see-
Ingram, who's
Yeah,
one
we
of
need
his
to-
guys.
Mhm.
We
Low-key
need to
the
see what happens
A-topic.
when they encounter like a good guard. I think it's the thing that we need to test that.
I was just going to say,
Uh,
low-key, a topic of the 2024 free agency period was how much some of these mid guards got paid. It was insane. One after
Ezra
the other,
got-
after the other, after
Yeah,
the other, after
Ezra
the
got
other.
paid.
That was insane.
Speaking of old ice cold draft takes of mine, Randy Lewis in the chat says Connor Williams over Reisner. That's an
Oh,
interesting
God, I
one
was
because he's
Texas
hurt right
so
now.
Big
Texas.
on Connor Williams, man.
Yeah.
He was the
Yeah, we're
guy
not about
I
to
wanted
get
them to
into
take
that.
over Mike Hughes. That was like what I always said. Which, but
Oh, you don't want
Okay.
Lamar? Come on.
uh,
Just kidding.
well, that ship had sailed. But Connor Williams is interesting because he's hurt right now, so he probably can't sign until after the draft. Which
Hey,
means that
that
he
means
would
he doesn't
not
count
count
in the
toward the
compensatory-
compensatory formula.
Huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that means he's not a CFA. So,
And there's
Man,
probably a few people out there that the Vikings could sign after the draft because then they get their like 2/3 next year. And the
Right.
Vikings
No,
preserve
that's a good
that.
point, too. Hey, they are clearly comfortable to a point with Blake Brandel. And
Mhm.
that's probably not
That's a
their
good way to
plan
put
A.
it.
It's not their
Yeah,
plan
exactly,
A.
yeah.
It's not their plan A. But worst comes to worst, they're going to say,
Brandel
"F
and
it,
Dan
we're
Feeney
fine."
have the saddest
Whatever.
competition ever.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
when I was
Remember when
looking
Colby
at-
Gossett had a real shot at the job?
Oh my god,
Danny Isidora.
Danny
we also
Isidora.
oversold Colby Gossett's shot at the job, but yes, I remember when
I mean, he was
Danny
rotating
Isidora.
in with the ones.
He
We
was,
thought it
he
was
was.
something.
Brandon
Yeah.
Fusco.
Danny Isidora, the guy
Fusco.
who started a lot, and so that was his scouting report.
That was kind of
Um,
Brandel's too. Sometimes it works. I
Yeah,
guess.
that's right. Yeah. But if you talk to Miami Dolphins fans about Connor Williams, well, first of all, they've been almost as traumatized as Vikings fans when it comes to offensive linemen. So grain of salt. But man, it seems like they love the guy. Like it seems like they're like, hey man, he pulled through. That's we needed some guys, and we needed guys that didn't absolutely blow, and he is not Eichenberg, and so we are happy with this guy.
Just for the
so,
men's,
that's
just
something
because
to
we were
keep in mind.
talking about 2017, here is your Vikings 2017 offensive line group: Riley Reif,
Oh, boy.
Nick Easton, Pat Elflein, Joe
Nick Easton.
Berger starting, Mike Remmers, Rashad Hill as that swing, Jeremiah Searles, Danny Isidora, shout out Sam, good call out, and Avante Collins. There you go.
A lot of dudes that
Aviante
teased us
Brings me
there,
back.
and one dude who was actually good,
290-pound
Berger.
guard.
Hey, that group kind of cooked that year though.
They kind of did.
They weren't bad. Yeah.
I was such a not a Nick Easton fan. I remember that. And I feel somewhat justified in it, but I definitely overdid it because
and that was the
I thought
can.
another mid.
He beat
guard
out
got
Alex
paid.
Boone, and we were all like, "What?"
Right.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Why am I blanking on the former number 1 or number 2 overall pick from Miami? Jake Long. What year was the Jake Long when we?
That was
brought him up?
2016.
When he played
the
like
year
a
before.
game.
That was the TJ Clemmings year.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
The second TJ Clemmings. He started 2 full seasons in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
neither
insane.
all
All
16
16
were
games.
his fault. He did not do that out of his own. Because remember,
No, nobody
Who was
wanted
the
this.
Not on purpose.
First
tackle
year
got
that-
hurt?
the Vikings signed 2 right tackles. One, they re-signed Phil Lodeholt. 2, they signed Andre Smith, and they were like, all right,
Both of them done by week 4.
one of these guys is going to start at right tackle. And Phil Lodeholt gets injured again, and he's like, I'm done. I'm retiring. And he retires. And then Andre Smith, week 4, is like, not happening for
Andre
me.
Smith. Wow.
Final
Funny.
minutes. We're gonna get to fan questions and juicy draft trade up scenarios. That'll
Juicy.
close us out on the Minnesota Football Party. And we're brought to you by Gametime, taking the guesswork out of buying tickets to sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. Last minute ticket deals. You can even get into the event up to an hour after the event starts. With zone deals, you pick the section, Gametime picks the seats for big savings. They also have all-in prices. They show you the total up front, so you know the great deal you're getting, and they show you the view from the seats. You can buy tickets simply in just 2 taps when you download the Gametime app. Find exclusive flash deals as well and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out, folks. Download the Gametime app. Do it now. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Redeem with the code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. I've starred several from earlier in the show. From Chris Olson. We might have addressed this too. If we trade up to 3 and May is gone, will the Vikings draft? No, we didn't get to this. Will the Vikings draft Jaden Daniels or JJ McCarthy if that's their choice at 3? I think Jaden.
For sure.
My mind will change weekly on that kind of question. This
Mine
week,
will
I
too, I
guess
think.
it's JJ McCarthy, but I don't feel like super strongly about that. This is just
okay.
Hey, like a bunch of people at the combine kind of suggested that they liked JJ McCarthy a lot. They didn't say what they meant by a lot, right? So I don't know what that means. And also that they were not that high on Jaden Daniels. But these are relative type considerations, right? They may not be that high on Jaden Daniels relative to Drake May.
Right.
They might be
right.
really high on JJ McCarthy relative to Michael Penix, but they still might like Jaden Daniels more. But vibe check, I think it would be JJ McCarthy in that scenario. Totally willing to be wrong on that because I don't feel that strongly.
I hope it's Jade McDaniels. I'll put it that way.
Jaden McDaniels, great Timberwolves defender.
Got him.
Too many postcasts. Is there a chance the Vikings are going to retain pick 23, make a modest move up to get JJ, and use 23 to grab another first rounder? So can they get the QB and keep 23 is what Edwin is wondering.
I think
that would be so sick, but I don't think that's
it'll be
possible.
very funny.
The board would have
certainly-
to fall a very different way than what we're expecting it to.
I think that
which
they
isn't
have
out
to
of the
go up
realm.
too high.
Yeah,
Well,
like, it would have to- He'd have to get
here's the
past the Giants, and I kind of feel like if he just falls to the Giants to take him, but if he does get past the Giants, then the fall is on, and then all you're doing is just making sure that Denver
Denver.
doesn't leapfrog you,
right.
Yeah,
which you don't have to. Like, you go to 8, you're fine.
the Vikings would not have traded up to 23 before the draft were it not for a move into the top 5. So that's the clear intention. That doesn't mean that that's definitely going to happen, but like you trade up to 23 when one of your guys falls in the first round. That's what happens if that's the pick you intend to make. right? But
Yeah.
this is clearly to
You're not predicting 22 picks by doing that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's certainly possible. I just think that
I think for me, Michael Penix is the biggest wild card of this. But of course, yes, the top 5 is the atopic for sure. But like, where does Michael Penix fall to? Which team does he end up? Is it a late first? Does he fall that far? Is it at pick 11, 12, 13 in that range? He seems like he's got the widest range of outcomes right now for me. And I'm for me personally, I'm invested into him. I'm just very curious what ends up shaking out with him.
So one of the biggest hurdles to this, Ed, is the Chargers are gonna say yes to a trade down. That's like everybody from the combine beyond knows that the Chargers are like very willing to trade down, try to build more things. Harbaugh's trying to build the team in like the image that he wants, and that's going to be a little bit more of a rebuild than maybe other candidates would have done with the Chargers, which means that they're going to be as interested in more picks as we think that somebody like maybe, New England would be because of how bad their roster is and all that stuff. Like they're going to treat it that way. Yeah. So I don't think that like if New England says no, okay, sure. If Arizona says no, okay, sure. Chargers ain't saying no. And so you're going up to 5. And I think that takes both the firsts.
Did Harbaugh, has he kind of tipped his hand as to why the partnership didn't work with the Vikings? Because he's unloading or letting walk all these offensive assets, like you said, rebuild situation. Is this why it didn't work with Minnesota with Harbaugh? Because of the direction he wanted to take it? I think this is actually pretty telling as to why that never came together.
I think the reporting that the interview was awkward because he thought he was going to be handed the job and he wasn't, and then he wasn't interested if he wasn't going to be handed the job, I think that's pretty decent reporting. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. I think by the time they were talking about like vision for the team, it was over.
Yeah. So I don't think it was because he wanted to like rebuild the team and his vision or anything like that. Like maybe that's what he would have wanted and it wouldn't have been a good fit. Like that's true, but it very much felt like he didn't think this was an interview and he thought it was a formality. And when it turned out to not be the case, it just became a very weird situation.
Awkward. We talked about Denver not having the ammo to move up over Minnesota, but the question here, could Denver use Patrick Surtain or another player, I guess, to bolster their case to move up instead of Minnesota?
Yeah, absolutely, they could. Why couldn't they? I mean, yeah, they've already shown we're willing to be flexible, cut ties with even some big names already at this point, outside of just Russell Wilson and that whole fiasco. But yeah, Cortland Sutton. I mean, I'd have to pull up their roster, but certainly, yeah, I think me included, throw out the term blue chip too much, but Patrick Surtain is so young. He's so good, plays such a premium position. I certainly think that would up the ante for any team if they were to throw him into the mix too. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It wouldn't shock me. Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they just decided Surtain was one of those we can't touch him guys. But man, can you imagine the Patriots with Christian Gonzalez and Patrick Surtain? Oh my God. That would rule.
Wow.
They wouldn't have a quarterback, but God, what a fun team.
So what do you think that would look like? So they have no second. So I'll give you 12 Surtain next year's first.
I mean, Surtain's a first.
Right. So that's
at least
a
first. Yeah.
So that's 3 firsts. Yeah. And we'll probably suck next year.
I wouldn't if I were Denver and I was trading Surtain in a package along with pick number 12, to get up to number 3. I would feel so uncomfortable giving up another one.
Another first. Sure.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense too.
Yeah.
I think it's similar to like the Vikings and Justin Jefferson. It's like, this is not part of the plan here.
Yeah. We're not picking up the phone. To Taylor in the chat, yes, I say GIF. Yes, I'm sicko for that, and I will accept that. This was fun. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the engagement. For Luke Inman, Luke Braun, Arif Hassan, I'm Sam Ekstrom. You can hear us again, live show Thursday on the Minnesota Football Party, the Ron Johnson Show tomorrow. And just a little tease, he's got a pretty big guest coming up on that show. So make sure you check out Locked On Sports Minnesota, the Ron Johnson Show there. Thanks a lot again today for watching and listening. Talk to you on Thursday on Locked On Sports Minnesota.